Chapter 6. The Perfect Plan. As the four of them step out of the grand hall, the midday sun beats down on Korsvik, casting sharp shadows across the bustling streets. The scent of roasting meat and freshly tilled earth fills the air as merchants call out their wares and townsfolk go about their daily routines. Despite the lively atmosphere, a weight lingers between them, the knowledge of their journey ahead. Thorn and Helga exchange a few hushed words before turning their attention to Royce and Octavia. "We'll make sure everything and everyone is prepared for departure," Thorin says, his tone firm. "Get your things in order and meet us at the gate tomorrow at first light." Both Octavia and Royce nod in agreement. "Good," Thorn adds, adjusting his cloak. "We'll leave at dawn." With that, he strides off into the town, disappearing into the throngs of the people. Helga lingers for a moment, stepping forward with an extended hand. "I've already met Octavia, but I don't believe we've properly introduced." Her grip is firm despite the smaller size of her hand. "The name's Helga." Royce shakes her hand, offering a polite nod. "Royce, nice to meet you." A slight smirk plays at the corner of her lips. "We have about a day's journey ahead of us, assuming we don't run into any trouble along the way." Octavia speaks up before Royce can respond. "We'll be ready." Her voice is steady, filled with quiet confidence. Helga acknowledges her with a brief nod. "See you both in the morning then." Without another word, she turns and makes her way into the bustling town. Royce and Octavia exchange a glance before making their way towards their hut. The streets are still lively, the marketplace filled with the chatter and movement. Along the way, they stop at a few vendors, gathering last-minute supplies, dried meats, fresh bread, and extra water skins, before continuing home. The two guards at the door give a brief nod as they pass. Inside, the warm glow of the midday sun filters through the small window, casting light across the simple wooden furniture. Octavia moves with practiced efficiency, emptying the satchel onto the table, carefully organizing their provisions. She counts each item twice, ensuring nothing is forgotten. Royce, meanwhile, settles onto a stool near the fire pit, running a hand through his hair. The weight of the decision sinks in. This just isn't a simple journey. It was an opportunity, an unspoken test. Would they prove themselves to leave to the people of Korsvik? And what dangers waited them behind the walls? Octavia's voice pulls him back to the present. He turns to find her watching him, her expression serious, her hands resting on the packed satchel. She exhales slowly, her gaze steady. "Are you ready for this?" Royce's eyes lock onto hers, searching for certainty in her expression. "Well, of course. Are you?" Octavia hesitates, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table before she slowly lowers herself onto the stool across from him. The flickering firelight casts shadows across her face, highlighting the uncertainty creeping into her features. "I don't know," she admits, her voice quieter than before. "Ever since Blackwater, it feels like I've been living somebody else's life. We wanted to sail east, to be free, to explore, to make our own choices." She pauses, her gaze drifting towards the small window, where the golden hues of the setting sun cast long shadows over the simple wooden walls. "But are we really free?" Royce doesn't answer right away, sensing she isn't finished. "We've been treated well, I won't deny that. But there are always guards outside our door. I feel like Leaf's men are always watching, always listening. If we try to leave, really leave, do you think they'll let us?" Her eyes meet his again, searching for something. Perhaps reassurance. Perhaps an answer that he doesn't have. Royce exhales slowly, leaning forward with his elbows resting on his knees. He considers her words carefully, realizing they echo thoughts he pushed to the back of his mind. "I'm not sure," he finally admits, I don't feel like there's. I. It does feel like there's always somebody watching, but I can't tell if it's because Leaf doesn't trust us, or if it's because he's afraid somebody will try to harm us. He reaches for his stray stick near the fire and absently pokes at its embers, watching as sparks rise and fade into the dimly lit air. But again, what choice do we really have? Octavia shifts on her stool, the tension in her posture growing. She places her hands on her knees and leans in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. If we wanted to escape tomorrow's journey might be our only chance. Ray straightens immediately, his heart pounding at the weight of her words. His mind races through the possibilities, the risk. He studies her face, looking for any hint of doubt, any sign that she might not be serious. But Octavia's expression remains unwavering, her resolve clear. She means it. Roy swallows hard, his mind whirling. The idea of escaping hadn't crossed his mind, not seriously anyway. But now that Octavia had spoken the words aloud, it was real, a possibility. He leans forward, lowering his voice to match hers. You're serious about this? Octavia nods, her jaw tightening. If we stay, we may never get another opportunity. Leaf wants us to prove ourselves, to fight for him, to intertwine our lives into theirs. Is that really what we wanted to sail east for? She exhales sharply. Regardless, I'll be by your side either way. Rice grips the stick in his hand, watching the fire crackle. He thinks of the guards outside the door, of Leaf's cryptic words, of Sovig's strange prophecy about his fate. There was so much they didn't know, so many unanswered questions. But one thing was clear. This may be their only chance to escape. And with that being said, my friends, we are at our first options of the day. We are met with two different options where we can either stay the course or plan an escape. Are we going to plan to escape, or are we going to stay the course and help Helga in Thorin? Get your votes in. It's 3-2 right now. Very close. Very close. 3-3. We have a tie. 3-4. We still have over a minute left to vote, my friends. Obviously, this is a contested vote. One of the most contested. One of the most contested votes. What are we going to pick? 40 seconds left. 3-4. 4-4. Who is going to decide the vote? Who is going to decide the vote? Is the D20 going to have to be the deciding factor? That would be wild. This is a big vote. This is a big vote. Five to 4. There it is. The vote is in. Planning an escape has won by a mere 1 vote. Royce's eyes lock onto Octavia's. searching for certainty. How do we do it? A flicker of something, hope, fear, flashes across her face before she leans in, her voice low and urgent. Tomorrow, when we leave with Thorin and Helga and the rest of the men, we watch for an opening. If we're being watched, we need to be careful. We can't just run. We need a plan. She runs a hand through her hair, thinking quickly. We'll have to wait until we're hours from Kolsvik. Once we're the door swings open without warning. A gust of cool air rushes in, carrying the distant sounds of the city. But all Royce can focus on are the two figures standing awkwardly in the doorway, Thorin and Helga. The flickering firelight catches their faces, an odd mixture of surprise and something else. Embarrassment, suspicion. I apologize, Thorin says, shifting his weight slightly. I hope we weren't interrupting anything. A bead of sweat forms on Royce's temple. Did they hear? He tries to gauge their expressions, but before he can dwell on it, Thorin presses on. There's been a change of plans. We leave now. Octavia and Royce exchange a glance, one that carries 1,000 questions, but no answers. No time to think, no time to ask. Just move. Wordlessly, they gather their belongings, their minds racing. Octavia double-checks the satchel of supplies she had carefully packed, her hands working quickly, but Royce can see the tension in her jaw. His own hands feel clumsy as he straps on his belt, securing his axes and dagger in place. Within moments, they are stepping out into the sunlight, following Thorin and Helga through the streets of Kolsvik. As they near the city's main gate, Royce feels a heavy weight settled in his gut. This was supposed to be tomorrow's problem, but now they are being pulled into something unknown, forced to act before they were ready. Ahead, Helga mutters something to Thorin, but Royce isn't listening. He glances at Octavia, and she doesn't look back at him. A silent question lingers in the air. Did they hear us? As they reach the gate, Thorin exchanges a few quiet words with one of the guards before turning back to the group. His expression is firm, yet unreadable. Are we ready? He asks. Octavia furrows her brow, glancing between Thorin and Helga. Are we not traveling with any other soldiers? Thorin and Helga exchange a brief but telling look before Thorin responds. The men we were supposed to take were needed elsewhere. It's just the four of us now. His voice carries a weight of both disappointment and unease. He hesitates for a moment, scanning their faces as if silently asking whether they understand the gravity of the situation. Let's move. Without another word, he strides forward, leading them through the gates. Royce follows, his mind suddenly clouded with uncertainty. 4 warriors to defend a village? The odds were grim. His earlier conversation with Octavia becomes shrouded by this new revelation. As the massive wooden gates of Kolsvik groan shut behind them, the familiar cobblestone path beneath their feet gives way to dirt. The sounds of the bustling town slowly fading into the distance. The land stretches before them, the early afternoon sun casting long shadows over golden fields. A few villagers dot the landscape, bent over their harvest, too consumed by their work to pay much mind to the small band of travelers. The fields gradually give way to rugged, uneven terrain, where the lush greenery is interrupted by jagged stones and patches of dry earth. The silence among them is thick, heavy with unspoken thoughts, until Helga finally cuts through it. So, she says, glancing toward Royce and Octavia, tell me, what was your life like before coming here? Royce shifts, his grip on his straps on his pack before answering. I grew up working on a farm, eventually running my family farm, he says simply. Helga smirks, eyeing him up and down. You look like a farmer, she teases, a chuckle escaping her lips. Her remark earns a quiet smile from Octavia, who nods in agreement. And what about you, Octavia? Helga asks, turning her attention to her. Octavia's expression softens as she reflects for a moment. I was a wanderer. I sought adventure, explored wherever my feet would take me. I lived off the land. Thorin grins. I knew I liked her. Helga rolls her eyes and playfully smacks his arm before continuing. That's interesting. I grew up on the docks in the sea. My father was a fisherman. For most of my childhood, I was certain I'd follow in his footsteps, until I met a shield maiden named Lexa. She took me under her wing, taught me how to fight, how to survive. Royce raises a brow. And your parents, what do they think of that? Helga laughs and claps a hand on Royce's shoulder. Being a warrior is one of the highest honors among our people. They were thrilled. My father told me if I could wield the sword half as well as I could gut a fish, I'd make a fine fighter. A brief silence follows, only the crunch of their boots on the rocky terrain filling the air. Then Thorin speaks, his voice carrying a different weight. I was born and raised to fight, he says firmly. Both my mother and father fought in countless battles. They lived and died by the sword. When I was a boy, they would tell me stories of the places they had been, the enemies they had bested, and the glory they had won. He pauses, his jaw tightening. If only I had gotten the chance to fight alongside them. Helga places a hand on his arm, her voice steady and resolute. Both of them feast with the gods in Valhalla, watching you carry on their legacy. There is no doubt in my mind they are proud of what you have accomplished. Thorin says nothing for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. Then with a small nod, he mutters, I hope so. As they continue their journey, the terrain grows harsher. The rocky path winds through dense clusters of trees, the skeletal branches swaying gently in the cool midday breeze. The sky, once clear, now carries a thin veil of clouds, dimming the sunlight and casting long shadows across the uneven ground. Royce tightens the grip on his pack, stealing a glance at Octavia. She moves with ease, her steps light yet deliberate. Despite their earlier conversation, she seems focused, determined even. He wonders if she's still thinking about their escape. Helga and Thorin lead the way, speaking in hushed tones. Occasionally, Helga glances over her shoulder at the two, as if assessing them, gauging their width. Finally, Thorin stops at the top of a small ridge, surveying the land ahead. We'll take a short rest here, he announces, dropping his pack onto the ground. Helga nods in agreement. We're making good time. If we keep this pace, we'll reach Hold by nightfall. Royce and Octavia settle onto a fallen log, stretching their legs. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. For a moment, everything seems peaceful, but Royce can't shake the nagging unease at the back of his mind. Then, just as he begins to relax, a sound cuts through the silence, a distant rustling, faint but distinct. Octavia stiffens beside him. Helga's hand instinctively moves to the hilt of her sword. Thorin rises slowly, scanning the tree line below. The sound comes again, closer this time. A snapping twig, followed by a soft shuffle of footsteps. Royce's pulse quickens. They are not alone. Thorin raises a hand, signaling for silence. The group remains still, their ears straining to catch the slightest movement. The wind carries the sound of rustling leaves and distant birds, but beneath it, closer, more deliberate, there are footsteps. Helga unsheathes her sword with practiced ease, her eyes scanning the thick underbrush below. Octavia grips her bow, her body tense, but ready. Royce's fingers tighten around the handles of his axes, his heart hammering in his chest. Then, from the shadows of the trees, figures emerge. At first, they appear as little more than shifting shapes along the foliage. Dark, cautious, purposeful. Then, the sun catches the gleam of metal, the outline of tattered cloaks, the flash of steel at their sides. A scouting party. Helga murmurs under her breath. Steady. Thorin warns, his voice low but firm. The figures step closer. Now fully visible. 5 men. Their clothes are ragged, their beards unkempt, their eyes sharp with hunger and cruelty. The one in the center, a tall man with a scar running down the side of his face, stops a few paces away. Traveling light, are we? The scarred man says, his tone laced with amusement. Not the smartest idea wandering these parts without any army at your backs. Helga takes a step forward, rolling her shoulders. And you're not the smartest lot either, she retorts, lifting her sword. Picking a fight with warriors and not farmers. The scarred man chuckles. Warriors, you say? His gaze shifts to Royce and Octavia, his expression mocking. These two don't look like much. Octavia stiffens, but Royce speaks first. Try me, he says evenly. The party of outcasts exchanges glances, their smirks widening. Well then, the man says, drawing his sword. Let's see if you're worth the trouble. As soon as the men charge forward, Thorin moves like a thunderclap, meeting the first attacker head-on with a brutal swing of his axe. The man barely has time to raise his weapon before Thorin's blade crashes into his shoulder, cutting deep. He staggers back, blood pouring from his wound, his scream lost in the chaos. Helga is just as quick. Stepping to the side as another outcast lunges at her with a rusted sword. She ducks beneath the wild strike and counters with a swift, upward slash of her sword, tearing through leather armor and sinking into flesh. The man gurgles as he crumples to the ground. Royce barely has time to react before one of the raiders barrels toward him, a dagger flashing in the dim light. He lifts his axe just in time, blade scraping against blade, sending sparks flying into the air. With a grunt, Royce delivers a kick to the man's stomach. He stumbles back, gasping for air, but Royce does not hesitate. He swings his axe in a clean arc, burying it into the outcast's chest. Octavia moves with deadly grace, letting an arrow fly before sidestepping an oncoming strike. Using the momentum to spin behind her attacker. Before she can react, she plunges her dagger deep into the base of a skull. A clean and merciless kill. As the body collapses, she yanks the blade free, her breath steady, her focus unwavering. The last of the outcast, the scarred man, steps back, realizing too late that his men have fallen within mere moments. Blood drips from Thorin's axe as he turns to face him. Still think we don't look like much, he growls. The scared man grits his teeth, rage and fear flickering across his face. Then without another word, he spins on his heels and bolts towards the trees. Oh no you don't, Helga mutters. She raises her arm, takes careful aim and hurls an axe. It spins through the air, end over end, before sinking deep into the man's back. He lets out a strangled gasp and collapses face first into the dirt. A heavy silence settles over the battlefield, broken only by the ragged breaths of the group. Royce wipes his axe clean on the tunic of the man he had just defeated, his hands still shaking slightly. The adrenaline still surges through him, his mind reeling from the sheer brutality of it all. Thorin rolls his shoulders and exhales, surveying the fallen enemies. Well, he says, his tone light despite the carnage. That was fun. Helga chuckles, retrieving her axe from the dead man. Didn't even break a sweat. Royce glances around the bodies, his stomach twisting. Then he turns and looks at Thorin. What now? Thorin sighs, wiping the blood from his blade. Now, we keep moving. They will notice the scouts haven't returned. It may make them panic and attack sooner. The group grabs their packs and presses forward, leaving the bodies behind as they continue towards Hall. Thorin tilts his head back and pours cool water over his blood-streaked face, letting it wash away the remnants of battle. The liquid drips from his beard in crimson-tinged drops as he exhales sharply. He wipes a hand across his face before turning to Royce and Octavia, his sharp gaze assessing them. I've heard the stories of how you two fought at Blackwater, he says, his voice steady but curious. And now, I've seen it for myself. A farmer and an explorer, holding their own in battle. Where did you learn to fight? Royce looks to Octavia first, giving her the chance to speak. She shifts slightly, her expression unreadable as she answers. You learn many things when you're on your own. I had no choice but to teach myself how to survive, how to fight. There's an edge to her voice, a weight that suggests that there's more than she's willing to share. Thorin studies her for a moment before giving a slow nod of approval. It shows, he says simply. Your movements are fluid, precise. There's no hesitation in your strikes. It's rare. His eyes then shift to Royce. And you? Royce feels a slight heat rise in his face as he scratches at the back of his neck. Well, I can't say I've ever actually been taught. No one's ever trained me, at least. I suppose it's more instinctual. Helga chuckles, folding her arms across her chest. That much is clear? She teases. Thorin smirks, shaking his head. For someone who has never been taught, you're not bad. But instincts can only take you so far. He takes a step closer, his tone shifting from amusement to something more serious. If you want to survive battles far worse than this, you'll need to refine those instincts. Learn discipline, strategy. A glint of mischief flickers in his eyes. Maybe I'll teach you a thing or two, if you make it through the fight at all. Royce offers an uneasy smile, uncertain whether to take that as encouragement or a grim warning. The group continues their journey through the rugged terrain, the afternoon sun casting long shadows as they walk. Conversation flows naturally, shifting from their experience in Kolsvik to tales of past battles and upbringings. Laughter occasionally breaks through the otherwise serious discussions, momentarily easing the tension of the mission ahead. As the sun dips lower in the sky, its golden light casts a warm glow over the horizon. In the distance, the silhouette of small buildings begins to take shape, nestled within open farmland. The stark contrast of the rocky path behind them and the sprawling fields ahead signals their arrival in Hall. As they approach the villagers take notice. A few pause their work in the fields, murmuring to one another before slowly following the group into the heart of the village. Their expressions are a mix of curiosity and uncertainty, eyes lingering on the weapons at the warriors' sides. From one of the larger huts, an elderly man shuffles forward, leaning slightly on a carved wooden staff. His weathered face breaks into a warm smile as he lays eyes on Thorin and Helga. It's good to see you, Thorin! And you as well, Helga! The old man greets. Thorin steps forward, embracing the man with a firm hug. It's good to see you too, Ingvar. He releases him and motions towards the newcomers. These are our friends, Royce and Octavia. Ingvar shifts his gaze to them, his sharp, knowing eyes studying them for a moment before nodding in greeting. Welcome, Royce and Octavia. But his eyes scan behind them, searching for more warriors. His smile fades, replaced by a look of concern. His brow furrows as he asks, "And where is the rest of the army?" Helga steps in, her tone calm but firm. "They were needed at the Fjall fortress." Ingvar stiffens. The weight of the news settles over him, deepening the lines on his face. His mouth presses into a thin line as his gaze flickers between them. "So, there are only 4 of you." His voice, though steady, carries a distinct note of worry. I already butchered his voice. Forgive me. Apparently, he became the parrot from that movie, Lion King. Thorin places both hands on Ingvar's shoulders, his grip strong and reassuring. 4 who fight as well as 50, he says with quiet confidence. "We will do what must be done." Ingvar exhales slowly, his worry still evident but tempered by Thorin's words. He straightens, shaking off his momentary doubt before motioning toward the hut. "Yes. Yes, of course. Please, come in. We have much to discuss, but first, let us eat and drink. You've had a long journey." With that, he leads them inside. The gathered villagers lingering outside, their murmurs carrying on the evening breeze. Inside the large hut, the air is thick with the scent of burning wood, aged ale, and the lingering aroma of past feast. The space, though smaller than the great hall in Kolsvik, bears a similar grandeur. Banners bearing the sigils of past warriors drape across the ceiling. Shields and weapons line the walls, and the intricate carvings tell stories of those who came before. Long wooden tables and benches fill the room, their surfaces worn from years of use. The group takes a seat at one of the empty tables, their bodies aching from the day's journey. A handful of villagers quickly bring out plates of roasted meat, freshly baked bread, and mugs of frothy ale, setting them down before stepping back. Without hesitation, the group tears into the meal, their hunger overwhelming any sense of decorum. The crackle of tearing bread and the snap of meat being stripped from the bones fills the air as they eat with urgency of those who do not know when their next meal might come. Ingvar watches them with a amused smirk, his old eyes twinkling with something between admiration and gratitude. "We came across a group of scouts on our way here," Thorin grumbles between bites, his voice edged with frustration. He rips another chunk of meat from the chicken leg before continuing. "We took care of them, but I'm not sure how their absence would be received." Ingvar smirks, fades, replaced by a look of quiet contemplation. He listens carefully, nodding as Thorin speaks. "Do we know how many of them there are?" Thorin presses, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Ingvar leans back slightly, fingers drumming against his mug as he considers his answer. "It seems they grow in numbers every time they come." He exhales heavily, the weight of the situation settling into his voice. "I wouldn't be surprised if there's over 50 of them now." The room falls into a brief silence as the number hangs in the air. Ingvar takes a long drink before setting his mug down with a dull thud. "They have a base, hidden deep in the woods. Even if you defeat the raiding party, they will only return with more. They recruit desperate men looking for a place to belong. The only way to stop this for good," his gaze sharpens as he looks between them, "is to destroy their base and their leader." Thorin's eyes flick to Helga. A slight understanding passes between them. He sets down his food, wiping his mouth before pointing a calloused finger at Ingvar. "How many of you can fight here?" Ingvar's face tightens as he calculates the number in his head. "We have 10 seasoned warriors, Another 20 who can fight if necessary, but they lack proper training. Royce glances at Octavia. She's quiet, listening intently, her fingers wrapped around the handle of her mug. When she catches his gaze, she gives him a small nod, silent confirmation that she's processing the same thoughts. Helga leans forward, resting her elbows on the table. We're outnumbered, she admits, but her voice is steady. But numbers alone don't win battles. Thorin huffs a quiet chuckle before downing the rest of the ale in one long gulp. He sets the empty mug down with a decisive thunk and leans back into his chair, his fingers idly tracing the rim of the cup. Well, he says, his voice slow and measured. We have two options. He pauses, letting the weight of the words sink in before continuing. We either play defensive, use whatever little time we have to fortify the village, set traps, and prepare for them to come. He grabs the ale pitcher and pours himself another drink, his movements methodical. Or, he lifts his mug to his lips, pausing just before taking a sip. His eyes flick up to meet Ingvar's. We take the fight to them. Hit them before they even know it's coming. Spare the village from destruction. Save those who can't fight from slaughter. He finally drinks, savoring the ale before setting down the mug once more. A silence lingers in the room, the only sound being the occasional pop of the fire and distant murmur of villagers outside. Royce watches as Thorin's words settle over the group and the weight of the decision pressing on everyone's shoulders. He glances at Octavia. Her brows are drawn together, her fingers drumming lightly against the wooden table. Ingvar is the first to break the silence, exhaling deeply as he rubs a weathered hand over his face. If you strike first, you risk walking into a trap, he says, his voice tinged with unease. We know little of their defenses, their numbers, how they operate inside the base. He leans forward, folding his hands together. But if we wait for them to come, we risk them overwhelming us, cutting through our people before we can react. Thorin nods slowly. He risks either way. He shifts gaze to Helga, searching for her thoughts. Helga exhales through her nose, arms crossed tightly across her chest. If we let them attack first, we give them the advantage of choosing the battlefield. They'll burn homes, kill innocents. We'll be forced to fight while protecting those who can't defend themselves. Her jaw tightens. I say we strike first. Royce listens intently, the reality of the situation sinking in deeper. He had fought before, but always in desperation, in the heat of the moment. This was different. This was strategy, planning. Thorin leans forward, his gaze steady as he addresses Royce. And what do you think? The weight of the moment settles heavily on Royce's shoulders as he feels the eyes of all the others fixed on him. He glances at Octavia, who watches him with quiet expectation. Then at Helga and Thorin, their expressions unreadable, but expectant. And this, my friends, brings us to the second option of the night. What are we going to choose? To be defensive or to be offensive? I have to piss. I'll be right back. Bub, get your votes in. Get them in. What are we going to do? Are we going to be offensive or defensive? We have a 2 to 5 vote. 5 votes for offensive. Another vote that could shape so many things within this story. How's it going, Divine? Another vote that could shape so many things. I have an itch at my upper back and I cannot reach it, and it's pissing me off. We might have to take out the axe soon. We have 20 seconds left in the voting stage. 20 seconds left. And it has been decided. We have decided to be offensive. Royce exhales slowly, his fingers drumming lightly against the wooden table as he gathers his thoughts. The flickering torchlight casts long shadows across the room, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Finally, he speaks. I agree with Helga. Let's take the fight to him. Thorin considers his words. Before Octavia finally speaks, her voice quiet but firm. Then we need to know what we're walking into. She leans forward, her green eyes sharp in the firelight. We don't have enough people for a direct assault. Not without knowing their layout, how many guards they have, where the leader is. She looks at Thorin. We need to scout ahead first. Thorin considers her words, then nods. Agreed. A small group, 2, maybe 3. We'll go to the camp, gather as much information as possible. He looks between them. The rest will prepare here, in case something goes wrong. I'll go, Octavia says without hesitation. I'll go too, Royce adds, surprising even himself. He meets Octavia's gaze, finding no hesitation in her eyes, only understanding. Thorin smirks. I appreciate both of your willingness, but Octavia and Helga will go. You're not there to fight, only to gather information. If things go south, you run. Understood? Both Octavia and Helga nod. Royce, let's see what kind of army we are working with here. He turns to Ingvar. Get your best fighters ready. We may not have much time. Ingvar rises, already calling out orders to the villagers lingering near the door. The village erupts into movement as people begin preparations. Helga and Octavia make their way to the door, the dim torchlight casting their long shadows against the wooden walls. Octavia pauses just before stepping outside, glancing over her shoulder at Royce. Her gaze meets his, and for a fleeting moment, everything else fades away. She offers him a small, reassuring smile and a subtle nod before disappearing into the night. The door swings shut behind her, and the room suddenly feels colder, emptier. Royce exhales, his hand gripping the edge of the table as a strange, unfamiliar weight settles in his chest. A tightness he doesn't fully understand. Until now, he had never truly considered what life would be like without Octavia by his side. The thought alone sends a ripple of unease through him, like a thread unraveling deep within. And now, she was walking straight into danger without him. A surge of urgency overtakes him. Without thinking, Royce pushes himself up so fast out of his chair that it scrapes the floor. His pulse bounds in his ears as he bolts toward the door, shoving it open with such force that it swings wildly on its hinges. Octavia, wait! His voice rings out into the night, desperation laced in every syllable. Scene! That, my brothers and sisters, is chapter 6, The Perfect Plan.